Today I am reviewing Murder in Mesopotamia by Agatha Christie. This book was written in 1936. Obviously we've got a Middle Eastern venue for this Poirot novel, and so far we haven't really seen Poirot too much out of England or France. So this one, the entire novel is set in Mesopotamia in the mid-30s at an archaeological dig site. And it's inspired somewhat by Agatha Christie's own work at sites in the Middle East with the Woolley family. The Woolleys were archaeologists, and it was through them that she met her second husband, Max Mallowan, who was to go on to be quite a famous archaeologist. The novel tells the story of a woman named Mrs. Leitner, and her husband is heading up the archaeological dig here, and she's in kind of a nervous state. She's a very beautiful woman. She's somewhat well-liked, but she also has some enemies because she likes to toy with people in almost this very unconscious way, almost the way a cat would toy with a mouse. But she's starting to get letters from her first husband, a man whom she found out was a spy during the First World War and whom she denounced as a spy. Apparently he was killed, but there were rumors that he may have escaped. Every time she's shown interest in a man, she would get a letter, a threatening letter, supposedly from this person. Then she finally does get married to Dr. Leitner, and they go out to Mesopotamia to hopefully escape these letters, and they're fine for a couple years, and then the letters start coming again. She's in a nervous state. She keeps seeing this kind of frightening, scary face at the window, and so Leitner hires a nurse to come out to kind of look after her and be a companion to her. The woman, as you might imagine in Agatha Christie, is murdered with a blunt instrument, and Poirot, who is traveling out in Tunis, is called upon to help solve the mystery of what happened to this woman. She was killed in her little apartment of this large complex where the team on the archaeological dig is set up. There's only one entrance to her room from a courtyard, and there were people in the courtyard at all times, but nevertheless she's found dead in her room, having been hit on the head. This is a very interesting novel in that we have a completely different narrator. Hastings is not along in this one. We have a nurse, the nurse that is sent out by Leitner to take care of Mrs. Leitner. Her name is Nurse Leatherin, and she's asked to chronicle the story in her own words. And so she sets it up with this large apology at the beginning, saying that she's not a writer, that she has very personal opinions about some of the people, particularly the ones she didn't like, and so that's going to come out. She's a very frank person. She was kind of a hard narrator for me to get under the skin of, which I guess is a credit to Christie, because the narration was completely different from other Christie novels that I've read, where Hastings or Dr. Shepard or another character, Anne Bedingfeld, were narrators. This woman, she's a lot less sure of herself, but she kind of sees herself as playing nurse to Poirot's doctor, almost like he's a doctor trying to in surgery, trying to cut something out, and in this case he's trying to ferret out a murderer, and she's always ready to help him through. She's a biased narrator, and she's got strong opinions, but generally Poirot trusts her opinions, so we trust her opinions. She can be a little petty, and particularly with some of the women that she encounters. I think one of the things that I really liked about this novel was, first of all, its connection to Christie's own life at the time. The character of Mrs. Leitner was loosely based on Catherine Woolley, the wife of this archaeologist, who was a rather high-strung person, maybe a little bit dominating, and then there's a young kind of nervous character who's made fun of quite a bit, named David Emmett, and people suspect that maybe she was modeling this character after Max, whom, of course, she met out there and fell in love with, who was very unassuming, kind of quiet, just did his work. And so it's got kind of a strong flavor to it. Now, there are some interesting things as far as, I guess you could say there's the colonialism continues through the novel. Servants and natives of the area are not given much time. They aren't discussed. They aren't considered any sort of threat. So they're no real. They aren't ever serious suspects. But they also aren't important witnesses, except for a young boy who is in the courtyard almost the whole time during which the murder took place. And but beyond that, what I enjoyed about this novel, and it didn't happen until maybe the last fifth of the novel, is that the narrator undergoes kind of a transformation. She starts to understand her surroundings and look at them in a different way. She's reflecting, and now that she's back in England, what it was like to be there, and she still has images and memories, and what was kind of just this dirty, muddy place where they were excavating for, clay pots, and nothing is as exciting as what you might imagine would be in maybe Egypt if they found it like a tomb of a pharaoh. But all of a sudden, the local color, the smells, the people, the richness of the culture all around her kind of awakens inside of her, and I thought that was very interesting. Another interesting aspect about the novel is Poirot's summing up. As he's been doing in the past few novels, he again grabs everyone, brings them together, and lays out the facts of the case, and then reveals who the murderer is. In this case, in this novel, there were two murders that he has to solve. And one of the philosophies that comes out of his summing up is the idea that murder becomes a habit. That once someone's killed, it becomes easier to take the next step of killing again, particularly when it's an act of self-preservation. But his summing up becomes quite philosophical in two respects. First of all, he describes it as a journey, and even the chapter is called The Beginning of the Journey, and the second half of his summing up is called The End of the Journey. And the second thing that's interesting about his summing up is that he begins by taking a quote in Arabic and saying it before the assembly. And I can't read the quote because my pronunciation of Arabic is not good, but this is what the quote is. And what it means is, in the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. And so he almost takes on a religious or a spiritual tone within the context of this, kind of fitting for the area in which they're doing their archaeological work. Nurse Leathern gets her own summing up in the last chapter, L'Envoi, or the conclusion, the result. And in it, she's a bit more serious, a bit more melancholy. She's alone. Unlike a lot of other Christie characters at the end, or at least female Christie characters at the end of a novel, she does not end up with someone. She doesn't find love, so it's a little bit more realistic. She's a much more realistic character by the end. And she's only writing this because she was asked by another member of the team, Dr. Riley, to write down her impressions, because she was involved but not so intimately and immediately involved. She was kind of an outsider to this little group. And her concluding statement is this: somehow, the more I get older, and the more I see of people and sadness and illness and everything, the sorrier I get for everyone. Sometimes I declare I don't know what's to become of the good, strict principles my aunt brought me up with. A very religious woman she was, in most particular. There wasn't one of our neighbors whose faults she didn't know backwards and forwards. Oh dear, it's quite true what Dr. Riley said. How does one stop writing? If I could find a really good telling phrase. I must ask Dr. Riley for some Arab one, like the one Monsieur Poirot used. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Something like that. The end. And so the novel ends in kind of a strange note for Christie, and it kind of leaves you hanging in a way. You have a character who's almost as if she's still processing what this event means for her. The solution to Murder in Mesopotamia is pretty fascinating, if not a little far-fetched. Nevertheless, as we begin to figure it out, it becomes more and more interesting. The second murder it comes about because a woman figures something out. She realizes how this murder has occurred. She's very intelligent, like Poirot, and she kind of plods forward and thinks her way through methodically and slowly, comes to the realization, unfortunately, she's killed because of that. And she gets killed with hydrochloric acid, a very unpleasant death. Nevertheless, I was prepared to give this a 3.5 out of 5, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, particularly because the last fifth of the novel is very gripping. Next, I'll be reading Cards on the Table.